The Food That Built America on the History Channel. New episodes coming to us Sunday, February 19th. Host Adam Richman here to chat all about it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So obviously we're in Chicago, the land of deep dish pizza and Italian beef, Chicago hot dogs. You foods that built Chicago, but we're learning about the foods that built America.
I think that's the beautiful thing about this show is that you're 100% right. You're not going to talk about going to Chicago and not talk about Uno, Due, Malnati's, Pequod. You're going to talk about going to Al's, Portillo's, Mr. Beef. You're going to talk about, Paradise Pups and whatever. I mean, Kuma's Corner and, the amazing food. But I think also people forget that Chicago also has this Ukrainian village aspect, the Maxwell Street Fair. And I think with Food That Built America, what's amazing is you can see that, no, it's not all and Italian beef and gay stock and you know what I mean? That it's not all cheeseburger, that there's also this remarkable history and that these foods occur in the most unlikely places. Like, I don't think that anybody would go, oh, Silicon Valley, naturally the birthplace of America's favorite cookies, Mrs. Fields. Like, it wouldn't compute. But that's, I think, what's fascinating, and I hope inspiring to the viewers that they can go, man, I can be from Chicago and be inspired to create taffy or fried chicken as much as I could make, the next Mr. Beef on Orleans.
Let's talk a little bit about growing up as a kid, because obviously the Flintstones was a big thing that my parents loved, my grandparents loved. There hasn't been new episodes, but Fruity Pebbles still on the shelves, and kind of that tie-in between a TV show or a movie and what you going and eat and buy at a grocery store. I mean, let's talk a little bit about that impact and how that revolutionized breakfast cereals.
100%. Well, let's just stop and realize that this is what I love about this show, right? Because that is a time capsule in many respects, because in the 1980s, you had the Reagan administration say you could advertise directly to children. So then you now had the first decade where you had latchkey kids, where they would come home alone, where you had a television in nearly every single home. You had multiple cars in every single home. So kids had agency. Kids could say, I want that. It wasn't that you eat what mom and dad eat. There was this whole new thing of children's sugared cereals. Then all of a sudden you take the cartoon characters from their favorite show. And what's that you say? There's no show. Let's make a cartoon character. Suddenly, and that's what you'll find out about in this show, it's the same executive creating Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Dig-'em Frog, Tony the Tiger, and we've created this mythology. Snap, Crackle, and Pop have never had a cartoon, yet we know who they are. You know exactly who I'm referring to. You know who Tony the Tiger is. There's no Tony the Tiger cartoon. And then you begin seeing things like Nintendo cereal, and it's really quite ET cereal. And it's just fascinating to think, wow, that really is the United States decade of the 1980s personified in breakfast form.
And speaking, another breakfast thing is that right now, sometimes it's too complicated, or you're too busy in the morning to make waffles. And the concept of the frozen waffles, I mean, that's also incredible too, because it's just a staple in every household.
Of course, and the thing is to think that you'd have to have a massive, heavy piece of electric equipment that was for one purpose. So you're taking up this much space in your pantry, on your counter, adding the potential for another fuse to blow or another fire. But that's the only thing the waffle iron is used for. It's not like a pan, which has multiple uses. So then you have to make batter. It's messy. It's time consuming. You have to clean it. Suddenly you have toasters in every home. So a child could make their own breakfast. You give a child agency. And I think that was a very big tectonic shift, at least in the food scene in America.
And also, too, we talk about, especially when people go to sports bars to watch their favorite game, chicken wings. I just thought that was always an invention that had been there since the beginning of time, but it hasn't always been there.
Not at all. They were cast-off parts. Wings, much like necks and backs, were used for making stocks and soups. And then the simple fact is that if you look at the Southern Sunday chicken supper tradition, the preacher would come around, get the optimal cuts known as the preacher parts, the breast legs, thighs, and the children would get wings. But that whole generation, as they came into their own, began valuing these otherwise cast off parts. And then a whole new tradition took hold. And yes, the average American will probably consume about 18,000 of them in their lifetime.
I'm quite almost there. I think
Who are you talking to?
I want to talk a little bit about how the show is created. Do you look at things that are in every household? Do you come through like, I wonder where this is made or how this gets started? How is the show put together?
Well, I think what's kind of fascinating is that A&E and history just have some really brilliant minds in development and Lucky 8 Productions as well. And I have to give credit where credit is due. I think that they're able to really pay attention to the needle of what people want to learn more of. And I think initially it began with the iconic brands, and then we moved to rivalries, then rivalries and partnerships. And now I think it's almost like encapsulating the personalities, and we've expanded from foods to pet foods, dog foods, to to sporting goods, to drink mixes, and you don't realize things like Jello, things like Kool-Aid, they also really came from places of extreme poverty, of extreme inspiration, of extreme entrepreneurship, even spirits. To get into the history of the margarita. Why is the margarita called? Some people say it's named for Rita Hayworth. Some people say because margarita being the Latin word for daisy, it comes from a type of drink called a daisy, and it was a variant of that. But even the way, why Cuervo, why tequila? And people will suddenly realize, like, oh, tequila grew in the United States after Prohibition because people were able to get it over the border from Mexico because all the distilleries in America were done, but not in Mexico. Mexico was able to send it up through the southwestern United States, and it had this whole other life. And then you're learning about the history of the Moscow Mule. And I think that's the thing that's really great. You realize how spirits, beverages, the people behind them have shaped culture. And it's one of those things like, does TV reflect culture? Culture reflect TV? And it's very much the same thing with food. Is food a response to culture? Is culture a response to what we're eating? And there's that awesome debate because you have those really kick-ass recreations. You're like transported right to that moment, that Chewit Cathy gets these chicken breasts that can't fit a Delta in-flight tray. And he said, what should I do? Let me try making a fried chicken sandwich. And it's a grade A chicken breast. Let's call it a Chick-fil-A.
This is so fascinating, and so many people are going to learn so much from the new episodes that are starting February 19th. The Food That Built America. Adam, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll see you in Chicago soon.
Hopefully.
Thank you.